Stop scrolling for just a moment. Before you spend another old wheat penny, check it carefully, because one tiny coin hiding in an old collection could be far more important than it looks. Today on Hidden Coin Millions, we're opening the door to 5 unbelievable Lincoln wheat pennies that have collectors looking twice, and the final coins in this countdown are going to take this story to another level. These aren't just old pennies sitting quietly in a jar. These are pieces of American history that have survived for decades, passed through countless hands, and somehow escaped being forgotten forever. And here's the suspense. You might already have one sitting somewhere in your home without realizing what you're looking at. We're counting down 5 wheat pennies, and each one has a different date, different appearance, and a completely different story. But don't jump ahead, because the most shocking discovery is waiting later in this video. So check your old coins, keep your eyes locked on the screen, and stay with me until the final reveal. Because today, Hidden Coin Millions is searching for the kind of tiny treasure that can make collectors stop everything and take a second look. Coin number 1. We're talking about a Lincoln wheat penny dated 1951, with no mint mark, a deep dark brown appearance, and the very fine condition you described. It may look like an ordinary old penny at first glance, but this is exactly where the excitement begins. Hidden Coin Millions is freshly updated every day, and today we're digging into another coin that could turn an overlooked piece of pocket change into a serious collector discovery. So don't skip ahead, because the details surrounding this little copper coin are where the real story begins. This 1951 wheat penny belongs to the historic Lincoln Wheat Cent series, a design that became one of the most recognizable coins in American collecting. On the front, you have Abraham Lincoln facing right, surrounded by the words, "Liberty, in God we trust," and the date. Turn the coin over, and you see the famous wheat ears framing the denomination, and the words, "United States of America." That wheat design is exactly why generations of Americans began calling these coins wheat pennies. Now here is where this particular coin becomes especially interesting. This is a 1951 issue without a mint mark, meaning it was produced at the Philadelphia Mint, where coins traditionally carried no mint letter. That detail matters because serious collectors don't simply look at the year. They examine the date, mint identification, surfaces, color, strike, preservation, and overall appearance together. A tiny detail that many people ignore can become an important part of a collector's evaluation. And then there is the composition. The classic wheat cent era used a predominantly copper composition, giving these coins their familiar warm brown, reddish brown, and darker brown appearances as they aged. Over decades, exposure to air, handling, moisture, and the environment can naturally transform the original surface into deeper shades. Your described example has a dark brown layer, giving it an unmistakably aged appearance. To a casual spender, that may simply look old. To a collector, the surface tells a story. But the real attraction is the combination of date, no mint mark, and condition. A wheat penny surviving from 1951, with the characteristics you described, represents another surviving piece of American numismatic history. Collectors are constantly searching through old collections, inherited coin jars, estate finds, rolls, and forgotten boxes, hoping to uncover examples that have escaped decades of attention. And that is what makes these coins so exciting. You never know where the next discovery is going to come from. The very fine condition you described is another major part of the story. At this level, the coin has experienced circulation, but important design details remain visible. Collectors pay close attention to Lincoln's portrait, the lettering, the wheat ears, the rim, and the overall amount of wear. They also look for unusual marks, damage, cleaning, discoloration, and other surface characteristics that can dramatically affect how a coin is evaluated. Now comes the moment many collectors have been waiting for. For this video, the market value you provided for this specific 1951 wheat penny in the described dark brown, very fine condition is $234 at hundredth. That is the figure you supplied for this example. It should not be presented as an independently verified universal market price for every 1951 no mint mark wheat penny. Actual market prices can vary substantially based on authentication, grading, provenance, eye appeal, and documented sales. And that is precisely why you should never casually dismiss an old wheat penny. A coin that has survived since 1951 has already traveled through decades of American history. If you are checking your own collection, don't rush. Examine the date carefully. Look for the mint mark or the absence of one. Study the surfaces under good lighting, and never clean an old coin simply to make it look newer. Cleaning can permanently damage collectible surfaces and reduce collector appeal. So, if you have a wheat penny sitting quietly in an old jar, drawer, album, or collection, take another look. The smallest coin can carry the biggest surprise. And this 1951 wheat penny is exactly why collectors continue searching. This is only coin number 1 on Hidden Coin Millions, and we are just getting started. If this first discovery already caught your attention, stay with me, because the next wheat penny could bring an entirely different story, a different rarity profile, and another reason collectors refuse to ignore America's old coins. Subscribe to Hidden Coin Millions, because we bring you freshly updated coin content every day, and you never know when the next hidden treasure is going to appear. Coin number 2. We're talking about a 1944 Lincoln wheat penny with no mint mark, a dark brown appearance with spots, and the old condition you described. And before you make the mistake of thinking this is simply another worn-out penny, look closely. Coins from this era have a story that reaches back to the middle of World War II, and that history makes every surviving example worth a serious second look. The year 1944 was not an ordinary year in America. The country was deeply involved in World War II, factories were producing materials for the war effort, and everyday life was shaped by shortages and changing priorities. Right in the middle of that extraordinary period, the United States Mint was continuing to produce Lincoln wheat cents for everyday commerce. That means this tiny coin was created during one of the most dramatic chapters in 20th century American history. The design itself carries the unmistakable identity of the wheat cent. On the obverse, Abraham Lincoln faces right with liberty, the famous national motto, and the date surrounding his portrait. Flip it over, and the reverse reveals 2 wheat ears framing the denomination and the words United States of America. That simple wheat design has become one of the most beloved symbols in American coin collecting. And then there is the composition. By 1944, the standard Lincoln cent had returned to its traditional copper-based composition after the unusual wartime experimentation of the previous years. The familiar copper surface gave these coins their characteristic appearance, and decades of circulation and storage could transform that surface dramatically. Your described example has a dark brown layer with spots, giving it an unmistakably aged look. Those surface characteristics are part of the coin's present appearance, but collectors should always distinguish natural aging from environmental damage, staining, corrosion, or later alteration. The absence of a mint mark is another detail that deserves attention. A 1944 wheat penny without a mint mark points to Philadelphia production. When examining an old wheat penny, the date and mint mark should always be checked carefully because different production locations and varieties can have very different collector interest. But here is what makes this coin exciting for a treasure hunter. 1944 is an important year in the wheat cent story. Collectors know that wartime coinage produced some of the most memorable chapters in U.S. Numismatics. That means a 1944 cent deserves more than a 1-second glance before it is tossed aside or spent. The old condition you described also gives this coin a powerful visual character. It has survived for more than 8 decades, passing through countless hands and environments. Every mark and change on the surface represents part of that journey. For collectors, however, condition is never just about whether a coin looks old. They examine how much of Lincoln's portrait remains, how clearly the lettering survives, how much detail is visible in the wheat ears, and whether the surfaces retain original characteristics. Now comes the moment to reveal the figure attached to this specific example. The market value you provided for this 1944 wheat penny in the exact old condition with dark brown spots you described is $294.00. That is the value you supplied for this video example, not a claim that every 1944 no-mint mark wheat penny is automatically worth that amount. Real-world selling prices can depend on professional authentication, grading, originality, eye appeal, provenance, and documented market transactions. Still, a figure like that is exactly why collectors keep searching. The excitement isn't simply about finding an old penny. It is about finding an old penny and realizing that its date, characteristics, condition, and authenticity may deserve serious attention. If you discover one of these in your own collection, slow down. Do not scrub it. Do not polish it. Do not scrape away the dark surface, trying to make it shiny. Instead, examine the date under strong lighting. Check whether a mint mark is present. Inspect both sides carefully and preserve the coin exactly as you found it. For an important discovery, professional authentication and grading can be a major step before making any decision about its value. And remember, the market for collectible coins can change over time. A coin's desirability can rise when collectors compete for genuinely scarce, attractive, authenticated examples. So if you believe you have something exceptional, patience can be just as important as discovery. Never assume that an old coin should immediately be sold simply because someone gives you a quick number. This 1944 wheat penny is another reminder that history can hide in the smallest places. A forgotten coin jar, an inherited collection, an old album, or a box that has been sitting untouched for decades could contain something that deserves a much closer look. And we are still only at coin number 2. Hidden Coin Millions is freshly updated every day with more rare coin discoveries, more unbelievable stories, and more reasons to check the old coins already sitting around you. If this 1944 wheat penny caught your attention, stay with us. Coin number 3. Our third discovery is a 1941 Lincoln wheat penny with no mint mark, a deep dark brown shade, and the almost fine condition you described. At first glance, it may look like another old penny that has simply survived the passage of time. But when you know what to look for, that little piece of copper suddenly becomes much more interesting. This is exactly the kind of coin that deserves to be pulled out of an old collection, placed under good light, and examined carefully before anyone makes a decision about it. The year 1941 places this wheat penny directly in a remarkable chapter of American history. The United States was approaching the dramatic events that would soon transform the country and the world. American industry was rapidly changing, everyday life was evolving, and the Lincoln wheat cent was still one of the coins Americans encountered constantly in ordinary transactions. The design was already an American classic. On the obverse, Abraham Lincoln's portrait dominates the coin, with "Liberty in God we trust," and the date surrounding him. On the reverse, the famous pair of wheat ears frames the denomination and the words United States of America. Those wheat stalks are what gave this entire generation of Lincoln cents its unforgettable nickname. Now look at the detail that immediately separates this example from many others. There is no mint mark. That absence is not an accident. A 1941 wheat penny without a mint mark indicates production at the Philadelphia Mint. For someone unfamiliar with collecting, an empty space beneath the date may seem meaningless. But experienced collectors know that the mint identification is one of the first things to inspect whenever a wheat cent is discovered. The year tells you when it was produced, while the mint mark, or absence of one, helps tell you where it came from. And then we have the coin's composition. Lincoln wheat cents of this period were made with a copper-based composition, giving them the classic reddish, brown, and dark brown surfaces associated with old Lincoln cents. After more than 80 years, the original bright appearance can naturally change. Your described example carries a dark brown shade, giving it a powerful aged appearance that immediately tells you this coin has spent a long time in the world. But collectors don't stop at color. They examine the portrait of Lincoln. They inspect the lettering. They study the wheat ears on the reverse. They look at the rims and surfaces. They search for unusual characteristics, varieties, errors, damage, environmental effects, and evidence that the coin has been cleaned or altered. Every one of these factors can influence how an individual coin is evaluated. The almost fine condition you described is another important part of this story. This means the coin has clearly experienced circulation and age, yet it can still retain meaningful portions of its original design detail. For an old wheat penny, surviving details can be especially important because decades of handling can gradually soften Lincoln's portrait and the reverse wheat design. And here is where this final coin delivers the biggest surprise of today's countdown. The market value you provided for this specific 1941 wheat penny with no mint mark, dark brown shade, and almost fine condition is $348.06. That is the specific figure you supplied for this video example. It should not be interpreted as a guaranteed market price for every 1941 Philadelphia wheat penny. Actual values can vary significantly depending on authentication, professional grade, surface originality, eye appeal, varieties or errors, provenance, and documented sales. But a number like that shows why old wheat pennies continue to capture the imagination of collectors. These coins are tiny, but their stories are enormous. They survived decades of circulation, changing generations, changing technology, and changing America itself. Some were saved, some were forgotten, some disappeared into collections, and some may still be sitting unnoticed in places where nobody has thought to look. If you ever discover a 1941 wheat penny, take your time. Examine the date carefully. Confirm whether there is a mint mark. Study both sides under good lighting. Compare the amount of remaining detail with known grading standards, and most importantly, do not clean the coin. A shiny-looking old penny is not automatically a more valuable penny. Original surfaces are extremely important to collectors, and improper cleaning can permanently affect a coin's desirability. If you genuinely believe you have an important example, professional authentication and grading can help establish what you actually have. Never rely solely on a photograph, a random online claim, or an unverified price when a potentially valuable coin is involved. And remember something else. Collectible coin markets can change. Desirable coins can attract stronger competition when collectors are searching for specific dates, varieties, grades, and original examples. That is why patience, preservation, and proper evaluation matter. Don't rush a potentially important discovery. So let's take a moment and appreciate what we have just uncovered. Coin number 1 brought us a 1951 wheat penny. Coin number 2 took us back to 1944, deep into the wartime era. And now coin number 3 takes us to 1941, another fascinating chapter in the history of the Lincoln wheat cent. And that is the real magic of these coins. They may be small enough to disappear in the palm of your hand, but they can carry decades of American history with them. A forgotten wheat penny can sit silently for years until someone finally notices the date, the mint details, the condition, and the story behind it. So before you ignore the next old penny you see, look again. Check the date. Check the mint mark. Check the surfaces. And most importantly, don't assume that an old coin is worthless simply because it looks worn. This is Hidden Coin Millions, and we bring you freshly updated coin discoveries every day. If you enjoyed this countdown, stay connected with us, because there are always more old coins, more hidden details, and more unbelievable discoveries waiting to be uncovered. And remember, sometimes the greatest treasure isn't the coin everyone notices. It's the coin everyone else overlooked. Coin number 4. Take a close look at coin number 4. The 1918 Lincoln wheat penny with no mint mark, a brown layer, and the dirty condition you described. This is not a coin from the middle of the 20th century. This is a coin from more than a century ago. Imagine how many decades this tiny piece of American history has survived while countless other coins from the same era disappeared, were damaged, or were simply forgotten. And that is exactly what makes an old wheat penny so fascinating. The year 1918 places this Lincoln cent in the closing period of World War I. America was experiencing enormous changes, industry was expanding, and the country was entering a new chapter of the 20th century. Somewhere during that remarkable period, this tiny copper coin entered circulation. It could have passed through countless hands, traveled through different communities, and remained in circulation long enough to develop the worn and aged appearance you described. The design itself is instantly recognizable to American collectors. On the obverse, Abraham Lincoln faces right with liberty, in God we trust, and the dates surrounding his portrait. On the reverse are the famous 2 wheat ears, framing the denomination and United States of America. Those wheat stalks are more than decoration. They are the defining symbol of the entire Lincoln wheat cent series. Now focus on the date, 1918. That date alone should make anyone who discovers this coin stop before casually spending it. A wheat cent from this early period has already survived for more than 100 years. When a coin reaches that age, collectors become especially interested in its originality, remaining detail, surfaces, and overall preservation. And this example has no mint mark. That means the coin was produced at the Philadelphia Mint. For collectors, the absence of a mint mark is still an important identification feature. When examining an early Lincoln cent, you should always inspect the area beneath the date carefully and make sure you understand whether the apparent absence of a mint mark is genuine or simply difficult to see because of wear or surface condition. Now let's talk about the brown layer. Copper changes naturally over time. Exposure to air and the environment can gradually transform a brighter copper surface into shades of red, brown, and darker brown. Your described coin has a brown layer with a dirty appearance, giving it the unmistakable visual character of a heavily aged piece. But collectors need to be careful here. Dirt, environmental residue, corrosion, and natural patina are not necessarily the same thing, and a professional examination can determine much more than the naked eye. This is why one of the most important rules for anyone discovering an old wheat penny is simple: don't clean it. That temptation can be enormous. Someone finds a dirty old coin and immediately wants to make it shiny. But with collectible coins, that can be a serious mistake. Scrubbing, polishing, chemicals, or abrasive materials can leave permanent marks on the surface and potentially hurt collector appeal. The safest approach is to preserve the coin as you found it and seek an experienced numismatic opinion if you believe it may be important. The condition you described is also a major part of the story. A 1918 wheat penny in dirty condition has clearly endured a long journey. The portrait of Lincoln may show substantial circulation wear, while the reverse wheat ears and lettering may display varying degrees of detail. Collectors look closely at all of these characteristics when evaluating an individual example. But here is the moment where this century-old coin delivers the number that makes this countdown truly explosive. The market value you provided for this specific 1918 wheat penny with no mint mark, brown layer, and dirty condition is $454. That is the specific figure you supplied for this video example. It should not be treated as a guaranteed price for every 1918 Philadelphia wheat penny. Actual market value can vary dramatically according to authentication, grading, surface originality, varieties, errors, provenance, eye appeal, and documented sales. Still, think about what this represents. This tiny coin has survived for more than a century. It comes from an era when the United States was undergoing enormous changes. It survived the passage of generations, changes in technology, changing currency habits, and decades of everyday circulation. That is the real treasure hidden inside an old coin. If you discover one yourself, don't rush to make a decision. First, identify the exact date. Then examine the mint mark area. Look carefully at both sides under good lighting. Study the remaining design details and preserve the coin without attempting to improve its appearance yourself. If the coin appears unusual or potentially valuable, professional authentication and grading can provide much stronger evidence of what you actually have. And don't forget that the collectible coin market can change over time. Scarce and desirable coins can attract strong competition when collectors are searching for particular dates, varieties, grades, or original examples. That is why patience can be extremely important when dealing with an old coin that appears exceptional. The 1918 wheat penny is a perfect reminder that age itself creates a story. But the exact combination of date, mint identification, condition, surfaces, and authenticity determines how collectors ultimately view an individual coin. So the next time you encounter a dirty old wheat penny, don't automatically throw it aside. Stop. Look at the date. Look for the mint mark. Look at the details. Because sometimes the coin that looks the most ordinary, or even the dirtiest, can be the one that makes you wonder why you ever ignored old pennies in the first place. And here at Hidden Coin Millions, we are freshly updating our content every day with more rare coin discoveries, fascinating dates, and unbelievable stories from the world of American coin collecting. This is coin number 4, and the countdown is getting hotter. If you thought a century-old wheat penny was already impressive, stay with me, because the next discovery could give you another reason to check every old Lincoln cent you have ever saved. Coin number 5. Another old Lincoln wheat penny with a story that begins nearly a century ago. This is a 1935 wheat penny with no mint mark, a dark brown layer on the reverse, visible green dots, and a circulated condition exactly as you described. And before you decide that the dark coloration or green spots make this coin unimportant, stop and take a closer look. With old copper coins, the surface is part of the story, and sometimes the details that immediately catch your eye are exactly the details that deserve the most careful examination. The year 1935 takes us back to an important period in American history. The United States was still living through the difficult years of the Great Depression, and the country was slowly moving toward recovery. Millions of Americans were using coins like this in everyday commerce. This tiny Lincoln cent could have traveled through stores, businesses, homes, pockets, cash registers, and countless hands before eventually being removed from circulation. That is one of the most fascinating things about the wheat cent series. These weren't originally made to sit safely inside collectors' albums. They were working coins. They were created to circulate. And every time one survived for decades and eventually made its way into a collection, another piece of American history was preserved. Look at the design and you immediately recognize the classic Lincoln wheat cent. On the obverse is Abraham Lincoln facing right, with liberty, in God we trust, and the date 1935 surrounding his portrait. Turn the coin over and the famous wheat ears dominate the reverse, framing the denomination and the words United States of America. But now, pay special attention to the reverse of this particular example. You described a dark brown layer on the reverse side with green dots. That creates a very distinctive appearance. Copper naturally develops different colors as it ages, and old coins can develop brown, reddish-brown, or darker surfaces. However, green material on copper should be treated carefully because it can sometimes indicate environmental contamination or corrosion rather than desirable natural toning. That distinction is important for collectors. In other words, don't assume that an unusual color automatically means greater rarity or greater value. Instead, treat it as a reason to examine the coin more carefully. And whatever you do, don't attempt to scrub those green dots away. Do not polish the reverse. Do not use household chemicals. Do not scrape the surface. An old coin's original surface can be extremely important, and aggressive cleaning can permanently alter it. If you believe you have an exceptional coin, preservation and professional evaluation are much safer choices. Now let's talk about the missing mint mark. This 1935 wheat penny has no mint mark, which identifies it as a Philadelphia issue. That detail is one of the first things collectors check when identifying Lincoln wheat cents. The date tells you the production year, while the mint information helps establish where the coin originated. The circulated condition also tells us something about its journey. This coin was not simply produced and immediately locked away. It entered the American economy and experienced real-world use. Over time, repeated handling softened the details of Lincoln's portrait and the wheat ears. The surfaces could also accumulate marks, discoloration, and environmental effects. For collectors, condition is crucial because two coins with the exact same date can have dramatically different collector appeal depending on preservation. They examine the remaining detail, surface quality, color, originality, and any evidence of damage or alteration. And now comes the moment we've been building toward. The market value you provided for this specific 1935 wheat penny, with no mint mark, a dark brown layer on the reverse, green dots, and circulated condition, is $378.00. That is the specific figure you supplied for this video example. It should not be presented as a guaranteed market price for every 1935 Philadelphia wheat penny. Actual selling prices can vary significantly depending on authentication, professional grading, surface condition, originality, varieties or errors, provenance, and documented auction results. But a figure like that is exactly why you should never dismiss an old wheat penny without checking it carefully. Imagine the journey behind this little coin. It was produced almost a century ago. It entered circulation during a completely different America. It survived decades of use, storage, and changing environments, and eventually became an object interesting enough for collectors to examine. That is the real power of these coins. They aren't simply pieces of metal. They are survivors. And when you're searching your own collection, the best approach is patience. Look closely at every old wheat penny. Confirm the date. Check whether there is a mint mark. Examine both sides under bright, even lighting. Look at the lettering, Lincoln's portrait, the wheat ears, the rim, and especially the surfaces. If you find unusual green material, preserve the coin exactly as you found it until you know what you're dealing with. Don't mistake cleaning for preservation. With potentially collectible copper coins, doing nothing can be far better than doing the wrong thing. And if the coin appears genuinely unusual, professional authentication and grading can help establish its identity and condition. That's especially important before believing a dramatic online valuation or making a major selling decision. Another important point for collectors is patience. The collectible coin market can move over time, and strong collector interest can develop around particular dates, varieties, grades, and authenticated examples. That doesn't mean every old coin will automatically rise in value, but it does mean serious collectors pay attention to coins with characteristics that stand out. So let's appreciate what makes this 1935 wheat penny so fascinating. An early Lincoln wheat cent, no mint mark, an aged dark brown reverse, unusual green dots, and decades of circulation behind it.